Tonight, charging documents are revealing new details about the 16-year-old arrested for the murders of 15-year-old Giovanna Gigi Myrie and her 9-year-old brother Steve Allen inside their Gwyn Oak home. Keith James Jr. remains in police custody, and now investigators have linked him to the murders, saying it's believed he and Myrie were in a relationship and had been talking for the past couple of months. Witnesses say during FaceTime calls with the couple, they saw James holding a handgun while in bed with Myrie.
In Baltimore County District Court, 16-year-old Keith James, charged as an adult, appears virtually. A judge denied James a transfer to a juvenile facility.
James told Myrie he would kill her if she got involved with other young men. Well, James told police that he had been trying to talk to Myrie for about 2 months, but he said he last met with her 3 days before the murder. Investigators say this contradicted evidence from his phone records showing that he walked away from a bus stop to use the victim's house and then to another bus stop on the night of the murders.
I'd like to say first that this is obviously an unspeakable tragedy. I would ask everyone to understand that we're only at the very beginning of this investigation. Our investigation hasn't really even started.
But he waived Thursday's bail review at the request of James's attorney, Brian Thompson.
Her brother loved Roblox and basketball. She loved golf, karate, and keeping her nails done. 2 kids figuring out a new house on a quiet street. Their mother worked a normal shift, came home at the normal time, walked through her own front door expecting a normal evening. She got the worst one of her life. Days before it happened, her daughter had already typed 2 words to a friend: "Help me." Nobody got there in time. This isn't a case number. It's a mother who lost both her children in the same house on the same evening, and a text message that arrived too early for anyone to understand what it meant. Gwyn Oak, Maryland, the kind of block where neighbors actually know each other, and a 9-year-old riding his bike past your window is just background noise. The family was new to the street. They'd just thrown the boy a birthday party, bounce house, the whole thing. The block was still smiling about it. Giovanna went by Gigi, 15, a student at Western, the oldest all-girls public high school in the country. And if you know anything about Western girls, they'll tell you that themselves. She played golf. She trained in karate. Nails done, hair never out of place. That wasn't vanity. That was a girl who knew who she was. Her brother Steve was 9. Everyone who knew him says the same 3 things. He loved roadblocks, he loved basketball, and he loved being around his family, which for a 9-year-old boy is its own kind of rare. 2 months before that July, Gigi started talking to a boy from the city, Keith James Jr., 16. On the surface, nothing unusual. Texts, FaceTime, the kind of relationship that lives almost entirely on a screen, invisible to whatever adult happens to be in the next room. But Gigi had a friend who was watching more closely than the adults were. That friend had been on FaceTime with the 2 of them, and on July 4th, she saw them together in person at Gigi's house. That's the day things shifted. According to that friend, Keith said something on the call that afternoon, something about what would happen if Gigi ever got involved with anyone else. And he wasn't just talking. Witnesses say he was holding a handgun while he said it, lying in bed next to a 15-year-old girl, 16 years old, and apparently the only way he knew how to prove he was serious was to show her a gun. Worth sitting with that for a second. A boy who needed a weapon in his hand just to feel like he mattered to someone. It wasn't just a threat that vanished into a phone call either. Investigators later pulled up texts on Gigi's phone that matched exactly what her friend described, in writing, weeks before anyone thought there was a reason to be scared of it. 3 days later, July 7th, the friend talked to Gigi one more time. Gigi mentioned Keith was coming by later that day. Nothing unusual in how she said it. No alarm bells. Just another visit, like any other. That same day, she sent the text. 2 words sitting in a police file right now. "Help me." By just after 4 p.m., a bus pulled up half a mile from the house. Keith stepped off and started walking. No hesitation, no wandering around, like someone who already knew exactly where he was going. A neighbor nearby heard something hit a door, the kind of sound you register for half a second and then forget, because nothing about your afternoon has changed. At the time, it meant nothing. Looking back, it meant everything. Around 5:08 p.m., gunshots went off inside that house on Tallis Road. About an hour later, Keith was caught on camera again, this time walking away. A different top than the one he'd worn in, but the same shorts, the same headphones, the same backpack. If you're going to change your look to get away with something, you might want to change more than the top half. He boarded another bus and rode back into the city. At 7:20, their mother came home from work, walked into her own house expecting the sound of a game, maybe a basketball bouncing somewhere. Instead, nothing. She found her daughter. She found her son. Both unresponsive. She called 911. Paramedics got there fast. It didn't matter. Both kids were already gone. A neighbor, Norma Townsend, was inside her own home when it happened. I heard the screams, these loud cries. It was heart-wrenching. I said to my husband, "Do you hear that?" And he said, "Yeah, what is it?" I looked out the window, and that's when I saw a woman coming out of the house, bent over, gasping for breath.
These loud cries, it was heart-wrenching. And I said to my husband, "Do you hear that?" And he said, "Yeah, what is it?" And I gave him his dinner, and I looked out the window, and that's when I saw a woman coming out of the house, bent over, gasping for breath. And it was like, yeah, she had saw something that was just devastating. And then you heard more cries and people gathering together. So I knew it was something very serious.
Police arrived to a scene that shook even the people paid not to be shaken by things like this. Baltimore County Police Chief Robert McCullough stood in front of cameras that night and didn't try to perform composure he didn't have. I've seen a lot of things in my career, but this is something that's horrific. It's tragic. Never have I seen something like this before in this neighborhood.
Good evening. I'm Chief Robert McCullough, Chief of the Baltimore County Police Department. This evening at approximately 7:20 p.m., officers from the Woodlawn Precinct of the Baltimore County Police Department were dispatched to the 6100 block of Tallis Road for a shooting. Officers entered the location and found two juveniles deceased at this location. The two juveniles were pronounced deceased at the time of the entry by our police officers. At this time, our homicide unit has responded to the location, and we right now have an ongoing homicide investigation. I've seen a lot of things in my career, but this is something that's horrific, it's tragic, it's something that doesn't happen in this community here. I've worked here for a long time, and the worst things we get here are speeding complaints, noise complaints, neighbor complaints. Never have I seen something like this before in this neighborhood, and we've tragically lost two juveniles, one aged 9 and another one 15. My heart goes out to this family. My heart goes out to this neighborhood. My heart goes out to the other children that may have gone to school or played with these two youths.
He called it an isolated incident, said it was too early to talk about forced entry or a weapon or who might be responsible. At that point, they didn't have a name. They had a 9-year-old and a 15-year-old, both gone, and a neighborhood that had never seen anything like it. What they did have was a trail. Cell phone data placing a device in the area that afternoon. Bus and neighborhood cameras placing a young man walking toward that house before the shots and away from it after. Piece by piece, all of it pointing the same direction. Investigators also had Gigi's friend and the text already sitting on Gigi's phone that lined up with what she'd described, a threat made in writing, weeks before anyone acted on the warning it contained. 2 weeks passed with no arrest. The community held a funeral before police held a suspect. St. Casimir Church filled with family, classmates, neighbors, people wearing black and yellow, Gigi and Steve's favorite colors. The service landed just days after what should have been Steve's 10th birthday. Then on July 21st, detectives finally sat Keith James Jr. down. He didn't deny knowing Gigi. He confirmed they'd been talking for about 2 months. He confirmed seeing her on July 4th. Then he told them that was the last time. Hadn't been back since. Simple story. Clean alibi. One problem, his own phone disagreed with him. Bus cameras had already caught him walking toward that house on July 7th and walking away from it an hour later. He wasn't just wrong. He was disproven by evidence that existed before he ever opened his mouth. Chief McCullough was asked later why the investigation took as long as it did. We had to make sure that we put together a very airtight case. Considering the age of the suspect, and with recent changes in the law in the state of Maryland, we had to make sure we did our work the right way, the way we always do. Fair enough, but somewhere in those 2 weeks, a 16-year-old had gone on with his life, apparently confident that a changed hoodie and a rehearsed answer would be enough. They weren't. Evening, both kids in that house would be gone. The next morning, detectives came back with a warrant. Keith Maurice James Jr. was arrested and charged as an adult, 2 counts of first-degree murder, plus a firearms charge on top of it. At the press conference announcing it, someone finally asked the question that had been sitting under the whole case. Why the 9-year-old? Steve wasn't the one anybody was fighting over. He wasn't part of any relationship. He was just home.
One day after their funerals, police had made an arrest in the shooting deaths of 15-year-old Gigi Myrie and her 9-year-old brother, Steve Allen.
I know it took much longer than I wanted it to. However, we had to make sure that we put together a very airtight case, considering the age of the suspect in this case. And when you consider how horrific this crime was carried out, it was terrible, and when you reflect on the fact that a child who had just turned 16 carried out this crime and did it in the manner and the way that he did, it's troubling.
My house and their house is only 2 houses with kids on the block. Now my son don't have his little buddy to play with no more. I just want closure for the family. The family are very close to me and most of these neighbors around here. I want closure for the mom and the grandmother and the rest of the family members. I really want to see what's going to happen when they get to court.
Why were you carrying a gun in the first place? I mean, that was premeditated to me.
Chief McCullough didn't pretend to have a confirmed answer. I can only speculate that he was a witness, an innocent bystander, and he was the result of everything that transpired that day. No confirmed motive was ever given for any of it. Not for Gigi, not for Steve. Keith's attorney, Brian Thompson, stood in front of the same cameras a short time later and kept it simple. This is obviously an unspeakable tragedy. Our hearts and sympathies are with the victims and their families. But I would ask everyone to reserve judgment, afford my client his constitutional right to the presumption of innocence, and reserve judgment until the actual evidence is presented in a courtroom.
My name's Brian Thompson. I represent Mr. James. I'd like to say first that this is obviously an unspeakable tragedy. Our hearts and sympathies are with the victims and their families. But I would ask everyone to understand that we're only at the very beginning of this investigation. Our investigation hasn't really even started. The Baltimore County Police, I'm certain their investigation is continuing. Our client, like every other citizen in the United States of America, is entitled to the presumption of innocence. So I would ask everyone to understand that this case is going to go on for quite a while, and I would ask everyone to reserve judgment, afford my client his constitutional right to the presumption of innocence, and reserve judgment until the actual evidence is presented in a courtroom where it can be challenged in our adversarial system.
In Baltimore County District Court, 16-year-old Keith James, charged as an adult, appears virtually. A judge denied James a transfer to a juvenile facility, but he waived Thursday's bail review at the request of James's attorney, Brian Thompson.
That's how the system is supposed to work. But in that same appearance, Thompson pointed out something himself, that police, as of that point, hadn't recovered a weapon. Not disputing that a shooting happened, just noting that nobody had actually found the gun. Worth remembering that presumption of innocence is a legal standard, not a rebuttal to a bus camera. Keith's attorney also asked the court to move him to a juvenile facility instead of adult detention. The judge said no. Cited the charges, cited the risk to other kids in that building. Keith stayed exactly where he was. No bond. Through his attorney, he entered a plea of not guilty. The case moved toward an indictment and eventually the circuit court in Towson, where it remains active. As of now, there is no trial date. Nothing here has been proven in a courtroom yet, and everything from this point forward is still legally an allegation, no matter how the evidence appeared to line up in the days after the arrest. Councilman Julian Jones, standing at that same podium, put words to something the whole county seemed to be sitting with. I am just taken aback by the fact that young people at the age of 16 years old would not only have access to a gun, but have the propensity to actually murder someone and murder two people. Baltimore.
I just would like to say how sad a day like today is, and please keep the families in your prayers. And I am so happy with not with the results, but I am so pleased that the police department did such a great, quick job to this part of the whole situation. So thank you, police officers, if you're in here, and thank you, Chief, very, very much.
Baltimore County's chief tried to put the case in context too. A low homicide count for the year, cameras on nearly every corner, a department that prided itself on catching the people responsible. All true. None of it changes what happened on Tallis Road, because strip away the press conferences and the charging documents, and what's left is simple. Two kids in one house. A relationship that lived almost entirely on a phone screen, invisible to the one adult who might have caught the warning signs. A threat made weeks earlier in writing, dismissed the way threats get dismissed when they don't look dangerous yet. And a text sent 4 days before it happened. 2 words, help me. Nobody got there in time to read it the way it needed to be read. The question this case leaves behind isn't really about a 16-year-old boy in a Baltimore County detention center. It's about how much of a teenager's life now happens somewhere nobody else can see. A text thread, a FaceTime call, a relationship that never once shows up at the dinner table until it's already gone too far. How well do we actually know who our kids are talking to, and how much time do we really have when something small starts turning into something nobody can take back?